All right, here we go. Teaching a Rockstar podcast. And on this episode, we have Lisa Wright. Now, let me tell you something, man. In my life, I have so many examples of how old I am. Like, there's a reminder almost every day that I'm old. So I was trying to calculate. I think Lisa and I met. Look, man, we're coming up on 30 years ago when we met in Georgetown. And Lisa, she's been busy. She's been on the move since over the last 30 years, the last 3 decades. She spent a couple of decades in the classroom teaching middle school, junior high, high school. In the last decade, she's been a high school counselor, and she is awesome. She has a book out. Listen, let me tell you something. She is not afraid to write about the things that people are most concerned about, and some people won't even talk about. She's written about. She has a chapter on like whatever you're concerned about. She has a chapter on that in her book. The book is called The Age of Outrage: Strategies for Parents and Educators. It's available on Amazon. Here we go. Teaching a Rockstar podcast. Lisa Wright. Let's do this. All right, man, let's get into this. So this is, here's the thing I always wonder, like, for somebody like you who's so deep and so many years into this education thing, and like you've been in different positions, like when you were in school growing up, and, were you the kid that was like involved in activities and had parents that were supportive and like that whole kind of traditional thing?
I would say yes and no. I'm from a small town, first generation. Obviously, I didn't even know what first generation was until I became an educator and looked back on my own life as a first generation kid. I referred to myself lovingly as small town stupid. Had no earthly idea. But obviously, it was a simpler time too. So yes, I was very involved in school. I enjoyed all levels of school: elementary school, middle school, high school. So I think that's part of what led me to become an educator. I enjoyed it, and I just wanted to turn around and, I didn't realize until I became an educator that not everybody enjoyed school like I enjoyed school.
Right.
So, just part of my goal has always been to, just engage kids into the process and see the fun side of school, not just the curriculum and just all that's gotten more serious over the decades.
Yeah. I was talking to a group of principals the other day, and I said, hey, man, you remember when this whole thing was fun? How cool was that?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I talk about all the time to people is my first year of teaching. Literally, I was handed one piece of paper, front only, and that had the entire scope and sequence. And they said, here you go. Here's the scope and sequence. Go enjoy yourself.
Yeah, go make it happen.
It was so simple. And as for testing, I literally remember we just taught, everything was normal, and then we stopped for the day of the test. We took the test in the spring, and then the next day we went back to normal. And it was just no big deal.
Yeah.
Or at least it felt like that to me. It could have been beginner's luck. I don't know, but that's what it felt like to me.
I think it was everywhere, man. I remember I remember teachers, this is like back in the early 90s, not even telling kids about the test coming up because you want to hear them complain.
Yeah. So we didn't say anything.
No, man. So like, not only was it not teaching to the test happening, it was like keeping it a secret, and they show up and like, what are we doing with all these pencils on it's test day? They didn't even know it was about to happen. And now it's like this whole, you got to have a theme, and you have theme music. We're getting shirts made, and we're going to decorate the school for test and have a pep rally. It's a whole different deal,
man. It really is amazing. Yeah. And in fact, I ran into one elementary teacher or administrator yesterday, and we were just talking about, just long story short, the human side of things, and how as educators, it's always been that way, but now it needs to be more purposeful. She realized that to help this particular kid, she had to get with the parents and have the parents just the part of the relationships, all that kind of stuff. And then the key thing she said was, and this has nothing to do with the STAR test.
Yeah.
And we're like, yep. And I get it. There's so much pressure on educators from the top down, state level, national level, to have good data, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just really gone to the nth degree.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And just there's so much pressure, not only just on like a superintendent, but then that all trickles down to some principal trying to keep their job. And then there's some, fourth grade teacher, and they're about to line you up with all the teachers and put you in order of whose kids did best on that particular day. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, the pressure. And then it's going to be in the paper and on the news and on the internet, and everybody's going to see. Oh my God.
Yeah, the immediacy of all the information, the pressure's there, but it's there every moment because of just everything being posted immediately. One thing I talk about in my book is just the outrage that's posted everywhere. Everyone's outraged 24/7 about everything. And so you're constantly, no matter whether you're an educator or just whoever, constantly on the defense about who's outraged at you about what. So then obviously that changes your entire behavior because you're double checking every word. You can't even be your authentic self if you're truly looking at life through that lens 24/7.
Man, we're going to talk about this in depth, but I mean, I can't even tell you. It's probably every day that I'm having a conversation, and oftentimes like, on the phone. I'll be on speakerphone, in some superintendent's office or central office or school office, and like you're right, man. Like every conversation, every single day, I'm thinking, can you say that? Like, what is that demographic? And I'm trying to
Exactly.
make it's so much pressure, and I don't know.
Hmm.
And I've been corrected so many times. It's like, well, I thought, well,
Hmm.
wait a minute. Yesterday they told me. Sorry, so we're gonna get to that, but let me kind of build up there. So you were, hey, by the way, how tell me the name of the town in which you grew up.
Kaufman, Texas,
All right, now how
east of
big is
Dallas.
that? How big? Like how many?
Well, one thing I joke about all the time is the school where I am now, and most of the schools I've worked in have been large schools. So the school I'm in right now has anywhere between 2,400 and 2,600 kids over the past 7, 8 years. And my entire town I grew up in had 3,000 people. So
Yeah,
basically, my school is the same size as the town I grew up in.
right. And so, did you have a Walmart or did you have a Dollar General? Like
Oh,
how?
no. No, we didn't have a stoplight. No. No, we were
Really?
excited when we got a Sonic, and then we were excited when we got a Pizza Hut.
Man, that's living large, man. All right.
Hmm.
And so you grew up, and in my experience with those towns, now I've taught in a couple of them where that's why most kids are involved is simply because one, there's nothing else to do, and two, like if you
Hmm.
don't play football, there's not going to be a football team. If you're not a cheerleader, there's going to be no cheerleaders, and if everybody's not in band, there's going to be no band. So like
Hmm.
that was the coolest thing where like in a school like yours now some high school kid like has to pick a major. Well, I'm going to be in band, but they can't be in football because that conflicts, or they can't be in track because of the band camp and all that stuff. Where in those tiny towns, man, when I was the band director, I might have 25% of kids with a uniform on because the rest of them were wearing a cheerleader or a football uniform, or they came out of
Hmm.
the snack bar, or they're on the spirit thing, or whatever. And like every kid did everything.
Yes, I talk about that all the time with parents, with kids, with everybody, just trying to explain the difference. And it's not just the town thing, I don't think. I think it's the generation of you have to be groomed to be a cheerleader, groomed from, birth on, basically.
Yeah.
Basketball, all the select, all the competition. And it's good because kids are involved in sports and whatever other activities from a very early age. But it also, the downside is once they get to middle school, high school, like for me, I played sports, but obviously I didn't play volleyball when I was in third grade. I didn't play volleyball until I got to seventh grade. I showed up, I tried out, it was great. We all played, and we all played multiple sports. Those days, for the most part, are long gone. You have to
Yeah.
be primed and ready for whatever that activity is once you get there.
That's so true. I can't tell you, like when I'm on the road traveling, I mean, not every time, maybe every other time, I'll see a volleyball team, I'll see a soccer team, I'll see baseball's the thing. I'm talking 8-year-olds on the airplane
Hmm.
to go play baseball somewhere across the nation, and they're 8. Now, here's the crazy part: is recently there was a thing on ESPN, and it was a gentleman on stage, and he was speaking to a ton of new baseball, draftees when they get drafted in. And so there's probably, I don't know, like 1,000, or 500 young men in the audience. And he said, "Hey, real quick, raise your hand. Who here growing up had a private batting coach or was on a traveling baseball select team?" And maybe two. Like
Mm.
maybe two hands went up, and like that's the thing, man. Like for like at that level, like I mean, it's a DNA thing. There's not a traveling team on the planet that's going to make you a major league baseball player. Do you know what I mean?
It's true. Yes.
I mean, I want kids to have amazing experiences and try. Well, that's cool, but I mean, as far as grooming a kid for a profession at the age of 8, I don't know.
Yeah, and what I see sometimes as a high school counselor is, let's take volleyball as an example. You get to that senior year, the thing that when you began playing as a third grader, second grader, first grader is like, okay, well, we want a college scholarship, so we're going to do the best, whatever. We're going to be in all the different things. So then you get to high school and you have that opportunity for that scholarship. and you're burned out. And you're just like, oh, I've just done this for so long. I just don't want to do it anymore. And I just hate to see that for kids, because again, that's what they thought they were working for that whole time.
Yeah. Hey, when you started teaching, was your gig at Georgetown was that your first job?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
started in December, middle of the year.
And then when how long were you in Georgetown?
I was there from 91, December 91 until 99.
Okay, and
So
that's when you
basically the
guys
whole night.
yeah, you guys went north.
Hmm.
All right. And then what was your second job after Georgetown? Where were you?
We went to Waxahachie for 3 years after that.
Okay. And then were you still at the middle school level, junior high?
That was my first foray into high school, and I can remember being shocked then. I think part of that, looking back, is just the changing of the times, obviously, because now we're
Yeah.
getting that much further away from the 80s, the glory land of all the simple life that we all live.
Right.
And then going to high school, it was the first time I had seen, and which now this doesn't shock me at all, but cussing and just that I walked into my classroom, and this is not a reflection of Waxahachie specifically. I loved working there, but my classroom had, I remember specifically, all the desks were just piled in one big pile in the middle of the room, and all the marks a lot, cuss words were on them, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So it was interesting. Yeah, it was more of an initiation for me into the high school world than anybody else.
Yeah. And then like how long did it take? I mean there's like a learning curve with high school.
Completely. Oh, I mean, you respond immediately, basically.
Yeah. I think you're right. But then here's the other thing I always think is I think sometimes we get tricked into thinking like that those kids are adults because they use adult language and adult
Right.
cuss words and they act, in with adult gestures and they have an adult neck tattoo and and unfortunately they're put in very adult situations way too early. But the thing is, man, like that's a child.
Yeah, I know from my own high school experience. That's one thing I think for me being a counselor or just even being an educator, I remember vividly my own experiences and my own decision making that I made. And just think of all the serious decisions we make between, well, really 14 when you enter high school and the age of 25. And your brain is still, it's just not there yet, but you're making very serious, like you were talking about deciding your major, getting married, having babies, very serious decisions, living in the
Yeah,
moment.
that's so true. And then at what point did you decide to do the counselor thing?
Um, Really, I think it was around 10 years. So 10 years in, so whatever
Yeah.
year that would have been.
And
Well, the
then
first thing I did though, I taught English in the very beginning, and then I got certified to teach journalism. And that really broadened things where I was doing journalism, yearbook, newspaper, really tapped into some of the creative things that I like to do. And that's ultimately what led me to becoming a counselor. I was a psychology major in the beginning, and I thought about being a counselor in the very beginning of my career. But just long story short, I ended up going the journalism route. So then I was keeping my kids for 4 years in a row, journalism one, then
right.
either 3 years of newspaper, 3 years of yearbook. And I ended up having all these, more in-depth conversations with them, longer and stronger relationships with them, and they would ask me to write letters of recommendation, just that whole 9 yards. So I thought, I really enjoy doing this, and I just like the project-based kind of stuff. So that's what ultimately then led me to becoming a counselor.
Did you feel tons of pressure like with the whole yearbook thing?
Yes, but I'm a very type A person, so I relish that. I don't know how to explain it other than yes, it's super stressful, but it's right up my alley. I like details, and I think that's why in the beginning I can remember thinking when I was just a psychology major starting out as a teacher that oh my gosh, I could never be a high school counselor and have to keep up with all the graduation plans and all that. That's too much stress. But everything that I did leading up to this moment really helped just prepare me for all of that.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, man. Like some people, like some people really, really thrive on like total freedom and flexibility. And but my thing is, man, like I love a schedule. Like I love when I got a deadline. I love time limits. I love make sure. I love an order. That's where and like a pressure. I love the pressure.
Well, and going back to what you're saying just about kids and they look like adults, but they're not adults, I would also add to that that kids they project to you that they don't want rules, they don't want structure, they don't want you to have expectations for them. They'll fight it every step of the way, but really deep down, They really do. They want to have some sort of a structure from you and know where the limits are. They'll still test you on them, but they really do want to know where that line is.
Yeah, I think there's something in that with that, like it's in the whole hierarchy thing, and like that need for safety. With a part of that feeling of being safe and secure comes when you know exactly what's expected of you and exactly what's
Mhm.
about to happen, and there's consistency in the workflow of every day. I think you're right, man. And then like a lot. I mean, that really curtails tons of behavior issues. Like when you combine that with that relationship component, and they have the structure in place, man, kids love it.
Yes, I can remember right before going in on my first day of teaching back in Georgetown, one of the mantras that I was given is be strict, but be firm, fair, and friendly. And that sounds so simple, and it is so simple, but that's the point. It is simple. You don't have to have something completely complicated to have good classroom structure, to have good relationships with your kids, but you have to work at it every day. It's not some cutesy little activity you can do the first week of school and then be like, cool, we've got a relationship, so now just do everything I say the whole year. It's a give and take the whole year.
That's the thing, you know. I mean, I always talk about that, like making that transition from classroom management to classroom leadership, and like that's the whole point of, like management. That's what it is. Like you set up the rules in the beginning, and we're going to stick to the rules, and this is how it goes. But leadership, it's like that thing. It's every day. Like we talk about our family value structure in this classroom family, and our core common values that we're going to share among, and we have a little conversation every day. Like, yeah, at the beginning it might be 17 minutes, and then a little bit, but then it might be 7 seconds, but it's something every day.
Yeah, one story I can tell you where I really learned this was in that first semester when I taught, because obviously I came in replacing someone else. And there had been, just long story short, there had been subs in there since around October. So I came into for that age, meaning time period, a somewhat chaotic kind of situation. And so obviously you come in new, and not everybody's going to like you just because you're new. You're different from the other person who was there. So I can remember a little girl just really fighting me on it. And, I'm new. I'm just trying to feel my way as well. And so just on that, long story short, I pulled her aside one day after class, and I don't remember the exact words, but we just had a personal one-on-one conversation about it, and then it was golden from there forward. And I'm not saying it's always that simple, that just one little conversation with somebody is going to do the trick, but 99% of the time, they can. What I say all the time is kids can smell a fake a mile away if you're just phoning it in and just trying to check the box to say we did something. Having that genuine relationship with them really does make a humongous difference.
Oh my God, like it's huge. And here's the thing, like in your position coming in, I mean, first of all, it's I think there's a subconscious thing where kids know she's a first year teacher. Like, surely she doesn't know what she's doing. But then, like, even at that age, I don't think they have a conscious thought because they're super young. But also, it's like, look at all the rest of those people that left us. Like,
Hmm.
and you kind of like have to pay the price for those other people that left them. And like, it really is a process of earning that trust, and like them feeling that emotion of, man, this woman is loving us relentlessly. Like she's not giving up, and she keeps coming back every day.
Yes, it's a definite everyday thing. That if I had to tell a first year teacher anything, it would be that it's every day. You got to be on every day. If you're sick, you got to be on. If you're tired, you got to be on. Yes, you might choose a different, and of course it's different now because everything is so structured where you really don't have as much control over what you choose to do in the classroom for your lessons compared
Right.
to early years. But as much leeway as you have with that, you might choose a different type of activity if you're not feeling well, but you still have to be on. You still have to be in it with the kids.
Yeah. I mean, you know what, man? Like that's the thing. I think people outside of teaching could never get, because in their gig, like if they're in real estate, they just don't work that day. Or if they're
Hmm.
a CPA, they just kind of put the head down in the cubicle, like, or
All those people, but yes, you're exactly right.
they can cancel the meeting, they can reschedule. But man, when you show up and you got 32 kids staring at you, you can't hide in a cubicle, man.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not for the weary, for sure.
No. Hey, at what point, where like how long ago was it where you started thinking, you know what, man, I've got something to say. I've learned so much. I've observed. I have so much experience. I have something I need to put down in writing and get it out there.
Well, I tell you, I've always, you know me a long time. I've always had an opinion, and I'm not the kind of person who just marches around giving people my opinion. My husband would differ on that, but I do have an opinion, but this was not something where I just thought for months and months and months. I was just observing, 'cause you'll remember mid 90s, or actually I guess it was 97, Columbine happened. So it's, all the school shooting things, those have been going on for forever, for the span of my entire career. So it's not like I've been thinking about this that whole time. But I think it was just the perfect verging of that history and what I was seeing just with kids and behavior, and just where I am right now and what I deal with and do as a school counselor, and the social media part of it. Just all these perfect world things just converge together, or I should say perfect storm, not perfect world. And then this past spring, first there was the Parkland shooting. And long story short, my kids, or not my kids, they are my kids, my dogs are at home during the day, so I leave the TV on. So when I get home at, anywhere between 4 and 6, the news is on usually. So I can remember coming home, the news was on, and I hadn't heard this yet. The Parkland shooting had happened. So I'm just standing there staring at the TV like everybody else, like, oh my gosh. And so then somewhere in there, the mosque shooting happened. And then, you're thinking, okay, well, these have happened. And then again, closer to the end of school, I come home and the Santa Fe shooting had happened. And so I'm, of course, watching the news, and I'm appalled just like everybody else. And I'm just thinking, as I'm seeing what all the media people are saying and the lawmakers are saying, and again, in their defense, I know they're just trying to fix something. They've got to come up with answers. They got to say something for a soundbite to give to the news. But just the things that were being said as far as how we, quote unquote, fix the situation, I just I came to a breaking point myself where I've got to speak out. So the initial catalyst was school shootings, but then as I started writing, that's where I started tapping into just everything that I've seen and observed and have experienced through my entire career, and it just all kind of came together. So really, it was more of an experience than a calculated move on my part.
Yeah, but that was it, the Marjorie Stoneman shooting, that was like the tipping point. That's where like it all filled up. It's like, all right, I gotta
Yes,
do
and
something.
then Santa Fe. And this was not really the specific reason why, but it just so happened that one of my college friends from SFA, his wife's mother was killed in the Santa Fe shooting. And not that that made it any worse. It's terrible no matter who dies. But when you know somebody, and of course I didn't know her personally, but just knowing that close connection, it's just like, it's got to stop. And I do want to make clear, I do not in my book say I've got the answer, because it's a human thing, just like with suicide prevention. It's a human thing. That doesn't mean we don't work for it. We work for suicide prevention day in and day out. And basically, one of the key things I'm saying is we need to work for prevention of school shootings and just kids using violence and aggression to solve problems. Because to me, that's what I see at school when kids get in a fight, when they argue with each other, when they are mean to each other online. And this is just the nth degree of that type of behavior. And I see the same thing for the kids who grow up to be adults, to do it, workplace shootings, movie theater shootings, those kinds of things. It's still people who are using violence and aggression to solve what for them is a temporary problem, but they're using permanent solutions to solve it.
Yeah, I always think back to when I was in high school, like in the mid '80s, and I maybe, and I think we had a couple thousand, 2,200, something like that, and maybe 4 fights, 2, 3, 4 a
Yeah.
year. But you
Mm-hmm.
know what? When my last gig at Cy Springs out in Cy Fair, I mean, it was daily, sometimes multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
to the
it's
point where schools have YouTube channels where it's dedicated to fights at that school.
yes, and it's a way to become a mini celebrity.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you talk to these kids and you have conversations with those kids in the office, and they were involved in that, do in their mind, is it completely justified, or do they just feel like they feel pressured into the aggression or pressured into fighting as a response? What's been your experience with that?
What I see is them really feeling like, well, a common complaint I get when kids come in, whether it's from fighting or just whatever, and different thing, is wanting someone else to do something that they want to be able to control. Even though they don't realize that's what they want to be able to control somebody else's behavior. So
Yeah.
if someone has posted something online, well, I want to control what they're saying. I want to control what they're doing. So I'm just going to go and take matters into my own hands and make it how I want it to be. So one thing I talk about a lot with my students is, even if it's when people come in and or kids come in and they're talking about something that their parents did, we talk about the problem, but I tell them real quickly, when I became a counselor, when I was transitioning from teacher to counselor, I genuinely thought part of my gig was going to be being able to solve everybody's problems, because I'm a fixer. I'm a type A, let's get it done, let's find a way to do this. And then I realized, well, that's impossible. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any problems in the world anymore, because someone would have fixed them a long time ago. So I talk about that with kids and help them to see that we only have control over so much. We can't control who our parents are. We can't control our home lives. We can't control, even when we get out in the real world, we'll have more control as adults, but ultimately we can't control what other people do. So we have to work on owning our own behavior in the situation. So we kind of bring it back to that. So it's less about the he said, she said with the student they were fighting with, and more, what can I do myself to handle myself in the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm trying to think. When one of my final years of teaching, I had a kid come into my class, and he came from the alternative school. And I think he'd been going just about every year since the seventh grade to alternative school, and he'd come back to the home campus after he earns his points. After whatever, maybe 6 or 12 weeks, he'd get to come back, and then but he was like, his personal recidivism rate was like 100%. He's going back every year, and he comes in and he's cussing and kicking the desk. I'm like, "What's up, man?" He's telling me about a kid that they're playing basketball at lunch. And he's telling me how he's going to kick his ass, and I said, well, what happened? He said, well, he threw the ball and hit me in the face. I said, did he try to? And he said, well, I don't know, man, but he did. And then he was trying to fight him, and then he said, man, he called me a bitch. And so he's telling me all about this. I said, well, hold on, wait a minute. You're mad at him, and so you're going to go fight him. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, brother, here's the news. You're his bitch. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, man, well, here's the thing. Like, he is totally have control of your emotions. Look at you, man. You're kicking the desk and cussing. He's in charge of you, man. And like, we had this long conversation about that. And like, I'm not saying it changed his life forever, but in that moment, like, he really was able to understand, like, the longer you're pissed about that and the longer like you think, you know what? I don't care what that dude says about me. He can't disrespect me. You know what? Because I don't care what he thinks. Like that's the next level for kids to get to. Like, once you get to that part, like, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. Like, now you're in charge of you. But that's a hard lesson for a kid, man.
Yeah, one conversation I've had many, many times in terms of fighting is, you've got the kid who was in the fight there, and you have them walk back through, well, what were your friends doing during this fight? Well, they're all standing around me, egging me on, right? And yeah. I said, so what happens to them once the fight's over? Well, they just go back to class. Yeah. So you need to be real careful about what you're doing, because your so-called friends who are standing here egging you on, they're just trying to get a rise out of somebody, whether it's you or somebody else. They're just trying to get a rise out of it, but they're smart enough to stay out of it. Don't let you be the one who gets in trouble and let everybody else just walk off back to class. Just remember.
Yeah. I remember years ago, when the fight would happen, it was like so shocking, and people were running to get a principal and running to get a teacher, and people trying to break it up. But now it's so far, like, the pendulum is so far to the other side, where it's not just they're cheering, but like, then it went to cheering, but now it's cheering combined with a kid trying to get themselves in the video, like holding his camera up. So he's the star of this fight that's going on in the background behind him. It's such a strange part of our culture.
Yes, definitely. And just the competitiveness, and like I said, the mini celebrity part of it. It's definitely an interesting mix of culture.
Yeah, you know what? And like, we always talk about like those human needs that kids have, and that sense of, that's the crazy part. Like, there's so many human needs that a kid has that's really being solved in that moment. Like, they have this crazy need for significance. And in that moment, whether if they're the fighting one or if they're the kid getting a selfie video of himself with the fighting, like, that makes them significant. And they need this sense of recognition. Well, all these kids are about to get some recognition. And it's not positive, but it doesn't matter. It's recognition, and it's some sort of significance. And they feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And there's this weird, human tribal thing that happens when everybody's involved in some mass, yelling and screaming and cheering thing. Like, if you really kind of break it down in terms of human needs, like, so you can check off so many boxes.
Yes, I don't know if you've ever taken a sociology class, but that was a class that I taught when I was at Waxahachie, ironically, and just learning about group norms and social behavior and why. With the one way I describe sociology to kids when they're thinking about taking it is like you got your street crowd and you've got somebody getting beaten up and why no one steps forward to help. And it's just all a thing. It's super interesting about just how the human mind and our securities control our behavior sometimes.
Yeah, and like that, that's why those TV shows are so fascinating because they have like that sociological foundation upon which they're built. John Kionis. What would you do? People love
Yeah,
that show because it's an amazing analysis of different people and human behavior and personality and the people that just let things go on, people that want to be a part of it, people that join in, or people that stop it. It's wild.
it really is. And going back to what you were saying a minute ago about social media and just how it checks so many boxes, just that whole experience. The opposite is true also. So you've got, in regular old high school, before pre-social media, everybody's just trying to fit in. They're trying to get noticed. They're trying to make friends, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then you put that out there on social media, which is a totally just a separate plane of their lives. And yet you've got those kids who are involved in everything and getting all the likes, and you got those kids who aren't getting any likes, they're not getting any responses. So the insecurity they would have felt before just kind of hanging out in the cafeteria, now it's multiplied 24/7 because they also have it on their phone with them all the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It really is. It's nonstop. You can't get away from it 24/7. And even when you're sleeping, in the back of your mind, you know what's going on next to you on the bedside table.
Well, and not to get into studies for too long, but there are studies out there that just show that kids are, and humans, adults, not just kids, lack sleep just because they're looking at that phone all the time.
Yeah.
Every time it buzzes, every time the light flashes, whatever. Whenever I call kids in to talk to them about grades and attendance, they know when they come into my office that I need that phone away because they're just still constantly, as you can imagine, just looking at the phone. It's amazing we can get anything done in education because of just the interruptions alone.
Have you seen that meme? I think she's a first year teacher and she's in Hawaii. I actually called her up, tried to, but we could never connect because of time zone difference. I wanted to interview her, but she did that tally thing. Have you seen this? Where she had like a big giant piece of,
I think I have seen that.
yeah, and it had Twitter, Facebook, email, text, Snapchat, WhatsApp, well, all that. And you had to put a tick mark. And so she had everybody turn their phones on. So everybody turn on notifications for everything. And they just,
Hmm.
and she went on with class. And it was thousands in one classroom in one period, thousands of notifications.
Yes, one comparison I make is like in our day, you had to physically pass a note. You had to write it on a piece of paper and fold it up, but then you had to somehow get it to that person. And if they were in a room down the hall or downstairs, obviously this can take a little bit more effort. So it's the equivalent of anybody on earth, including parents, walking in to your classroom and handing you 500 notes, and I need you to read these right now because they're really interesting. I need you to read them right now, and everybody stop what you're doing because we got some notes to read. That's literally the equivalent of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And by the way, just between me and you, the fact out there missing out, these kids are missing out on that fancy fold of the note. That's
Oh,
disturbing.
yeah, and all the design, the art skills, to design the
Yeah.
outside.
And
Yeah,
sometimes if you had a really cool girlfriend, she'd kiss it with the lipstick before she gave it to
sure.
you.
LYLAS, love you like a sis.
Yeah. What always wondered was, I don't know this information, but it's probably out there. Like all the chemical stuff that happens in the mind when you're on social media for a kid, and there's all the dopamine and all. Like, I wonder what the half life of that is in terms of like as a drug. Like, so this kid at 10 o'clock still doing Snapchat and the whole thing. Like, I wonder how long does it take for that to wear off? I mean, it might be a couple hours
Well, I'm
still.
not a scientist at all, but there's definitely research out there. And I would say that it's like anything else. You do a little bit in the beginning and you get a big hit, a big bump off of it, but then you need more and more and more.
Yeah.
And so it's just you're constantly seeking that hit that you get. And obviously the kids don't even realize any of that. A lot of adults don't even realize that. They just know they like it, they want it, and it just sucks you in. And I want to note for everybody, I'm not anti-social media. I talk about that in the book because obviously I'm talking to you through an electronic means right now. I talk about electronics, I talk about social media, And I talk about I'm not the old lady saying we need to get rid of all of this, because that's not how it's going to be, right? We all need
Yeah.
it. There are many wonderful things that we get from it. Like just my husband and I trying to navigate through Austin, even though I used to live here. We have commented so many times, well, I don't know how we ever got around here without our phones, because we're looking for the exact map, that kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
don't know. We had superpowers back in the 90s getting around without a phone. But anyway, I'm not anti social media, not anti electronics. It's just about all of us learning how to use it and not letting it control our lives and control our emotions.
Yeah. The whole outrage thing. What in your mind, like, can you do you remember a time where it just like was like, wait a minute, like you didn't notice it, and all of a sudden it was just so much of the out like. Because I'm trying to think back, and I really can't pinpoint. Like now, I struggle with the whole thing. You know, I have a daughter. She just graduated from high school, and she went to a very liberal school. It was a performing arts high school here in Houston, and because of that, like a lot of her friends and classmates, I mean, there's a ton of outrage about just about everything. And
Hmm.
but I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to pinpoint when that started.
I don't know. To me, I think it's probably always been around, and maybe it might be a part of our age too, just getting to a certain point where we really start to notice those kinds of things, and or just care more about it. I don't know. I don't know if it's an age thing, but I would say within maybe the past 5 years, again, converging with the more common use of social media. We're on social media. We all are able to, and we feel entitled to our opinions. And so some people are more comfortable just putting an opinion out there, no matter who they're talking to, as aggressive as you want to, and then you just turn back to stirring your spaghetti and cooking your dinner. What I think is that we all, going back to what I said before, we all have control over our own behaviors, our own emotions, and we should have some responsibility with what we say, even if it's quote unquote on social media. We'll never see that person, but when we multiply that out times everybody, there's so much aggression out there. Now there's happiness out there too. There's people like me sharing cat videos, pet videos, whatever, but there's so much aggression out there. I've particularly noticed it really just rising over the last 5 years, I would say.
Yeah,
And
when
it's
there's
probably a combination of me looking for it, but noticing it and then looking for it.
like complete lack of tolerance for anything.
Yeah.
And you know what? You know, now I'm thinking about it is, I think what really clearly has been a contributing factor is that it's that human need to be on a team, right? And so like be a part of something. And so with that divisiveness that's happening just politically, between right and left, and then the media, starts pushing everybody, people more right and more left and more divisive. I think that right there encourages a lot of the outrage as well.
Yes, and the need for the sound bite. Again, going back to my journalism background, you
Yeah.
need sound bites. So, and no offense to the media, I love the media. I think that it's a shame that newspapers, old school paper newspapers, are going by the wayside just because of just the sign of the times. Um, People aren't reading as much. People aren't getting just exposed to more in-depth news. They're getting just little bits and pieces, and not really worrying about the critical thinking side of it. Like on social media, you're scrolling through and you're getting all types of sources of information. It is important for you to evaluate your source, and not that any source is any better or more right than others, but you and I can sit down and we can type anything we want and put it out there right now, and some people are going to believe us and some people aren't, and you just have to be a critical thinker, and we have to teach our kids to be critical thinkers when it comes to that.
Yeah, even there's even tiny little things that are kind of sign of that where I'm not sure if you saw the story. I think I have it right. This could be way wrong though. It was a meteorologist recently was fired because he would not use the words. The station wanted him to use. They were changing when there's a storm. They wanted him to use the words code red alert. And he's like, well, it's a storm. It's not really a code red. That makes you think something like a tsunamis coming in Cleveland. And then on air he said, I'm not saying this. And so he ended up getting fired because he just refused to make it bigger than what it really was.
Hmm. Well, and speaking of being fired, another trend that I've noticed just over the past, again, I would say 3 to 5 years, is just the the need, the off with their heads mentality of if someone, and again, I'm not supporting people just saying whatever they want and being offensive, that kind of thing, but if someone misspeaks or someone says something that somebody else disagrees with, we shouldn't just have this battle of trying to just get everybody's jobs from them.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go with free speech if this is going to be, the off with their heads mentality?
Yeah, I agree. That's a hard thing. And one of the quotes I really like in the last, I guess, year or maybe year and a half was the gentleman who's running for office here in Texas, and he was a Navy SEAL, and he has the eye patch,
Oh
and
yeah.
you made fun of him on Saturday Night Live, and the next day it was all over the news, and they finally got him, like, it kind of cornered him for the interview. And they asked him if he was offended, and he's like, by the way, this is like a Navy SEAL. I have a feeling he's not bothered by much. And he says, you know what? I really work hard in my life, really, really hard at not offending anybody. But what I work harder at is not being offended by people. And I
Yes, and
thought,
that whole lesson right there, going back to what we're talking about with the whole fighting in schools, is
yeah,
instilling in kids the ability to not just take whatever off people, that kind of thing, but just you don't have to get outraged and fight people every time someone disagrees with you or says something mean to you, because trust me, out of high school, people are still going to offend you. They're still going to say something mean to you or about you.
yeah. And I think in my position, like, because of what I've done over the last decade, is anytime you get in front of thousands of people, there's going to be a few who just go out of their way to make sure how much they hate you, and and here's the thing, man. In the very beginning of this whole deal, it really was painful, and I figured out why, and that was because when people say they loved what I did, like I really took it to heart, and oh my gosh, they love me. But when you do that, what you find out real fast is when somebody says they hate what you do and hate what you stand for, and then you're going to take it equally to heart as much as you
Yeah.
did. So it's as much as it felt good, it's going to be equal in terms of pain on the other side when that happens. So I just had to come to realization, wait a minute, man, it's not about me. It's not what I'm doing. It's like whatever these people are finding within themselves based on what I happen to be doing and talking about on stage. And even, more than that, like you have to come to the point where in terms of negativity, like how much do I know this person? How much do I respect them? Because for me, that is going to determine the level at which I think about what they have to say. And 100% of the time so far, all that negativity, I don't know who they are. Like, really, I don't know what they stand for. I don't know anything about them. So it really doesn't matter to me. And I think that's a
Yeah,
great
one
lesson for
thing that
kids too.
I think about and kind of try to relate it back to educators is um, teachers a lot of times I think are afraid to reach out to parents because they're afraid they're going to get griped at or attacked. And I can remember as a younger teacher just being deathly afraid to call parents because I knew they were going to gripe at me personally. But I think that if we just encourage teachers to, and not just teachers, but all educators, just to talk more with people. What I realized that once, when people are calling you and they're being aggressive with you and they're griping at you, and this is similar to what you're saying with your commentary, it's really not about me most of the time. I just need to be quiet and listen and just kind of be there for them, and things will calm down eventually. And it's the same thing with teachers. I think they would be able to get further in the classroom with some of your more challenging situations by just listen. If the parents gripe at you, that's fine. Just get through that, and just remember it's really not about you, even though it feels very personal. Like you're saying, the negative feedback, it feels very personal, but a lot of times it's not about us at all. It's just about, people have stuff they're dealing with, and we just have to work through that. And just remember, we all have some sort of baggage that we're carrying around from our own lives.
Yeah. We think about, that was always such a huge lesson in my classes. And, I ran this PALS program for a long time.
Mhm.
And when we're preparing our seniors in high school to go be mentors and to children at the elementary school, like they have to, everyone has a story. And what they realize because of what we're going to experience with our kids, one of the things we do in our classroom is we share our stories, and like some things have been challenging in our lives for us. And when these kids sit around and they realize, oh my gosh, here we, 600 people applied for this program to be in our shoes, and like we're the 60 that were selected because we have the kindest hearts, we're the most compassionate, and they hear those unbelievably challenging stories that they've all endured, and they think to themselves, can you imagine what the rest of the people in this high school are going through?
Mm-hmm.
And what I think we forget as teachers is, you know what, those adults, those parents, they have stories too.
Yes,
It's
we all
everybody.
have stories that we bring to the table.
Yeah. And I think you're right, especially for a younger teacher, because man, it is intimidating. Especially
Yeah.
like if you you're in your first couple of years, you don't have kids yourself, and you haven't gone through the parenting process, and and just to have that, just to dial the number, like I've seen teachers that can't do it. They just cannot even they can't even get close to doing it.
Yes, I can remember my very first parent phone call, and those were the days of no phone in your classroom. You had to go down to the teacher's lounge. So I remember it was at lunch, everybody's sitting there eating their lunch. I'm over in the corner. I call, and I mean, remember the student's name. I remember everything about this moment. And this was almost 30 years ago, and
Traumatized.
oh my gosh, she was letting me have it. And I lived through it, and then I hung up, and I just burst into tears right there in the teacher's lounge. So I totally get it. But, and I guess again, part of this is just age and just realizing that, there's always a story, and most of the time it really isn't personal, even though it feels extremely personal.
Yeah. One of the things I always tell those first year teachers, well, first, like in their first few years, is put yourself in as many really uncomfortable positions as you possibly can. Because like that is what leads to absolute comfort in this career. Like as the longer you put off the uncomfortable, the longer you keep it comfortable right now, is the longer you're going to be uncomfortable in the end. And it's just going to get worse and worse. But if like you can steepen that learning curve right now, put yourself in as many uncomfortable situations and awkward, and you're not sure and unsure of yourself, because you're going to get through it and going to be better, and you're going to be so much better off in the long run.
Yeah, I was talking about that to somebody the other day. Just looking back over my career, all of my growth has come from the most uncomfortable situations. Just when you just feel like, oh, I just can't do this. But then once you get past that and you look back, you just realize that those are the things that stick with you over the years. You don't think back to 10 years ago to all the very calm days you had. You think back to those difficult days and how you forged through it. I was kind of mentoring a teacher. This was a few years back, first year teacher, and she was in it was a band director, and just in a very, and from her perspective, and again, perspective is everything. From her perspective, it was just a terrible, terrible situation, very challenging, that kind of thing. And I told her that whole story, that 10 years from now, when you look back, you're going to realize that you were growing more now than you have any concept of, but you can't see it until you get to the other end of it and you look back.
Yeah. That's true, man. Like those days, it was just like, and especially in band, it's just like, yeah, it's a pretty good rehearsal, and we had fun. It was okay. You're not going to remember that in 20 years. It's not even going to be a blip on the radar. Those days that, yeah, I think you're right. Those days where you grew and you kind of stretched, and maybe even grew a callus on that day, emotionally or intellectually. That
Mhm.
like those are the ones that last forever.
Well, and just being an educator, you put yourself out there every single day, so you got to make it worthwhile.
Hey, in your mind, when you were writing this book, what part, when you're typing this thing up, at some point you had to think, okay, some of this is going to be controversial. Like somebody's going to hate this part. For you, what is the main part? Do you think people might find the most uncomfortable to read and to think about?
Well, I think two different things pop into my head. Number one, about the whole school shooting part. I don't
Yep.
want people to look at it and go back. And in fact, I tell people it's not just a quote unquote school shooter book. Um, and there, what I found is that, and again, I was not political before this. I have a master's degree in political science and criminal justice, and I'm embarrassed to say I had never even voted in anything other than student council elections in high school until just recently, and I've been around a while. So when I tell you I wasn't political, I was not political. And one reason I wasn't political is because I have always strongly felt that a lot of politicians use education as a platform, and then nothing ends up happening. There's
Right.
nothing positive that comes from it. I talk about this in the book, that one thing I see and what a lot of educators see is that we're told this, and this is going to happen, but what's really happened is the budget's been cut, and we're just all asked to do more with less with every year that goes by. I can remember my first faculty meeting, literally my first faculty meeting, where they were talking about budget cuts, and I'm just fresh out of college going, wow, what's this about? And every year since then, that's all I've heard about. So just doing more with less, more pressure on us to just get it done with fewer resources and just fewer people, that kind of thing. So anyway, the whole gun part of it, a lot of people think it's either pro-gun or native gun, and it's not about guns at all. I do have a chapter in there where I address guns and politics, because you can't have a discussion about school shootings without talking about guns and politics. It's naturally a part of the conversation. So I would say that is something that's probably going to get people to be like, I don't know. And then the second thing is just what I ended up talking about, just the evolution of education. We all want to be comfortable with where we are in education and the policies, and we're doing everything right. And if we just have more policies, then we can fix things. And the education as a system just tries harder and harder and harder to fix things. Yet at the same time, like what we were talking about at the beginning, sometimes it's too much, and sometimes there's just too many boxes to check, too many hoops to jump through in order for us as educators to be successful. I don't know all the details on T-test that came about after I got out of the classroom, but I do know that T-test puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and all the time that it takes, just the paperwork alone, whether it's electronic papers or paper, that just takes a lot of time and mental energy that teachers could be using to, going back to what we're talking about from the 90s, just getting to know your kids and interacting with your kids and having the mental energy and not having to check all these boxes of things they have to do.
Yeah, I think so.
So
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, that whole part about the standardized testing piece, that I don't know, and because of the political platform of it all, and like I think they feel like they have to have some sort of measure. I don't know, like if it's ever going away.
yeah, I agree. I do hope that we can find our way a little bit better with it, because to me, it just seems like it's more and more and more. And so when we don't get the results that we want, we just do more tests, more checks, more pre-tests, more post-tests, more benchmarks, more of everything. And this was also something I said just the other day. When you, just with testing alone, if you test kids over and over and over and over, you're assuming they're bringing their A game every time they come and sit down. And anybody who's been an educator for a long time, or even a short time, can tell you that's not the truth. They sense that they're over test, so they're just going to phone it in. They're just going to go through, and not everybody. There's always going to be your contingent of people who want to do really well and who want to make the A, get the 100, whatever. But you're just your average kid. There's going to be a lot of phoning it in the more you stick tests in front of them.
I had a friend of mine counted up all the days that his kid, I think he was in junior high at the time, was focused on some sort of a test or pre-test or practice test, and it was a full 6 weeks. So it was 30 days. So 1/6 of the school year was spent practicing for a test, taking a test, or something.
And each part of the lesson that's forced in there to try to be part of the test, as opposed to true old-fashioned bell ringers, that kind of thing, where you're building rapport with the kids, you're building a classroom culture with the kids, versus feeling pressure to just hurry, hurry, hurry and get through each box you have to check off to say you did all these things.
Yeah. Hey, like one part of writing a book freaks me out is I have this friend, and he's in Florida, and he's an author and makes like a ginormous amount of content online for fitness. And but one thing I like about this guy, like as soon as he learns something new, he'll immediately go back and edit and say, "Hey, that whole second chapter thing I did, I was way off on that." But like that's the part that freaks me out about being on. Like at some point after you published, did you think, "Oh man, you know what I should have done," or why didn't I put this, or I should have put that
I can
instead?
tell you, just going back to my whole type A perfection with a yearbook, because a yearbook really does need to be perfect. Otherwise, you're going to be held accountable if something gets in that book that shouldn't have gotten in that book. So going with that mentality, it was a visceral experience for me to even push submit to make it that final,
Right.
yes, we're going to print. I mean, and going back to the emotional side of it, I experienced in that moment every emotion humanly possible, from I can't believe I did this, euphoria, to self-loathing, just, oh my gosh, no one wants to hear what you have to say. What could you possibly have to say? Just every emotion. It was crazy. I've never experienced anything like it.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Adam Sines? Have you met that guy?
No.
He wrote a book called Power of a Teacher. And it's a crazy story how we got reconnected. But we went to high school. We were actually in sociology class together. Now that you bring it up, and
Interesting.
yeah, and we were the last two people on the planet anyone ever thought would do what we do. And anyway, he's written a few books, and we were talking about that. And I was telling him, man, my theory, like I don't even want to do it because, like, I guarantee I'm going to think something different in a year because I'm on the road. I meet people and they say smart stuff, and I think, I never thought of that. And he goes, man, he was telling me, man, that's not really what the book is about. Is a book is about to encourage people to think for themselves. And you know what? Somebody disagreeing with you is just as important as somebody going and getting new information and going, oh man, this is great. I agree with this guy. Or it might affirm what they already think. But even somebody who totally disagrees and think that's not wrong, well, at least you got them thinking. And like, I like that philosophy for me. Like that makes me feel more content about the whole process.
Yeah, I think anytime you write a book, and my book in particular, it's just a snapshot, a moment in time. Two things I would say for mine is throughout it, I do not say, I'm right, you're wrong, this is what we need to do. Because again, there's no one right way to do anything. But number two, I talk about it throughout it, that the key to everything, not just school shootings, not just classroom management discipline, is starting a conversation. So going back to the whole outrage, we're all so busy just having our own opinion and not listening to other people's opinions that we really have to talk to each other. Parent teacher have to talk to each other, educator to educator, spouse to spouse. I mean, just all of us. We just have to talk to each other more. We're losing the art of talking, even though all we're doing is talking all day long in little sound bites, mostly online, because we're talking to more people than we've ever talked to before because we have access to all those people.
Yeah. I have a friend. He's Joe Beckman. He's on the road. He works with schools and teachers and kids. Does a lot of kids. Does amazing programs for kids. And his whole thing is based around this crazy concept called human connection, and like yeah, it's just crazy. Like this has become a thing. Like giving people strategies to sit down and talk. You know what I mean? And to look people in the eye.
Right?
Yeah. And like, it's crazy that, I mean, it's awesome that he's made a career out of it, but also like, that's like where we are, like in the world. Like, I can't tell you like how many schools I visit and like, you got to watch out for teachers going by and kids walking by because they're on their cell phone. You got to dodge them, have to get out of the way rather than, making eye contact and really connecting with a human being.
Well, and funny story, one administrator I work with who I love to death, I was talking with her at lunch, hunting her down at lunch. I need to get with you. I need to ask you some things. So lunch is one of the main times we can hook up. So I'll go to wherever they are. So I went to her and just long story short, she won't even eat in front of the kids because she doesn't want somebody to catch her in an awkward eating kind of a still shot because it's going to be all over Earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's changed the way we've all lived.
When you're sitting there at your computer and you're up late at night, you're up early in the morning and you're typing this thing out and you're using the weekends and doing the whole thing and you're losing sleep because you're in the moment of creativity and you can't, and you don't want to ruin the flow of creative momentum in your mind when you're typing it up and creating, who are you speaking to? Was it parents? Was it teachers, kids? Like,
I
who'd
think
you have in your
initially
mind?
it started out as parents, but then, like I said, the more I got into it, because I guess my initial reaction is the pressure on schools to fix the school shooting problem, just like there's pressure on schools to fix the suicide problem. Well, we're a school. We can't fix everything. And there was a police officer, I think it was Dallas Police Department police chief at the time, this was a few years back. He had given a speech somewhere or made a statement about just all the social ills that are put upon police officers to try to fix, where they're not just police officers anymore. They're more social workers as well as police officers. I feel that way about education. Every time there's something that comes up, it's put on educators. Well, y'all need to fix this. Y'all need to figure out a way. So we come up with a policy. We come up with a procedure, a checklist, whatever, to try to fix this problem. And we are truly at a crossroads / breaking point on that, where schools cannot fix things without parents. We have to work together. So again, it's about reinventing that relationship and just re-emphasizing, going back to what I was saying about teachers reaching out to parents. We have got to connect with them. That is the number one way we're going to make things better. Notice I'm not saying fix, because lots of things aren't going to 100% be fixed, but they can certainly be prevented and they can certainly be improved.
Yeah. One of the things I have coming up is I haven't told anybody about this and talked about it openly, but So many times during my events for teachers, I have teachers come up and they say, "Thanks so much, it was great." And what really to talk about is when you were speaking, I wasn't thinking about just my kids at school. I was thinking about my kids at home. I was thinking about the kids in my neighborhood and my role as a parent. And so what I have decided to do is do what I really want to do what I do, but I really want to do it for communities. And I really want to have events. Yeah, they're for teachers, but they're also for parents and principals and Rotary Club and Lions Club and the Chamber of Commerce. And I really want to go to communities and bring people out at an event where we can talk for a few hours. And because I think everybody's on the same page, but they just don't know that they are. Do you know
Yes,
what I
I,
mean? Like,
I say all the time, it's all connected. And I mean that. Everything we all do, it's all connected. We can't look at using aggression as an example. You cannot look at aggressiveness in adults and separate that from aggressiveness in kids. Kids learn it from somewhere. And I'm, again, not throwing adults under the bus, but it's learned behavior. So it's everything we do is all connected. And the more we can work together as a community and as Pollyanna as this might sound, as a society, we have to work together as a society.
yeah, and I think that's like where you grow up. Like that is those are the places that I love to work the most, simply because they had the fabric of those communities. Oftentimes, are a little bit stronger and more in place because they've lived there for generations. And oftentimes, when I'm in Nederland ISD or Orangefield or wherever, like half the staff went to school there and they've come back to teach and they
Yes,
still grew up there. And there's, and they have funny family rivalries with the town 6 miles away. And like, and where, it's kind of like the mayor, they just kind of, trade that role around to different people in the community. Like it's
yes.
your turn to be the mayor. And I feel like it's just, clearly it's easier to be effective in those communities because it's smaller, but I think we overlook how great those places are.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
You,
just the connections, the relationships, the families,
yeah.
whether you're related, or just family because you've known each other for 30 years or 50 years.
Yeah, and but who gets a ton of press is those districts like here and here's like Cy-Fair or Katy or up there there's wherever you guys are like Crowley and Plano and those places because they're giant and they have 10,000 kids in the school, but really where magic is being made in terms of education and societies and communities are those towns that have one high school, one junior high, and one or two elementary schools.
Yes, and even in your bigger conglomerate type districts, I say this all the time as well. All is not lost. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh,
No.
everything's terrible. Oh, it's terrible." There are wonderful things that happen every day, everywhere. It's obviously the huge stories, the school shootings, those types of things that make the news as they should. Obviously, that doesn't happen every day, but there's so many good things that are happening. But for us to prevent the big things from happening, it's just layers. It's layers of things that we can work on every day that don't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be complicated, just simple human to human help.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I think, man, I think so. This is like, in terms of a tipping point, this is it for you. So you have the book out, and there's a whole bunch of people going to love it, and there's a handful of people you're going to piss off, and that's okay too. And so what's next for you? I think, I mean, and people are going to want to hire you and come and have you speak in conferences and all that. Is that kind of what's next on the horizon?
Well, I'll be honest. When I wrote this, I didn't have a quote unquote platform. I didn't have any of that. I wasn't even thinking about that. And I didn't even realize that that was a thing because it wasn't a calculated move. So I write this and then I put it out there, and my friends immediately give me in a very good way good feedback. Well, you got to have a platform. It's not just going to sell itself. And I didn't even write it to sell, even though it's on Amazon for people to read, and people need to buy it to be able to read it. So I'm working on the platform, working on meeting people, working on all those types of things. And so I didn't even really start thinking about what you just asked me until the tail end of after I'd written this. So I'm working on two companion documents that are going to go with it, that are going to help parents and help educators be able to use the information in the book. Because a lot of the book is big picture ideas about where we need to go from here. But also, I would love to be able to, just like I'm talking with you, I think just like an educator is more effective there in the moment talking to the classroom, the educator and me would love to just talk to people about it. So in
Yeah.
whatever way I can branch out and do that, that's kind of the next phase of where I'm going with this.
In terms of a big picture, I think those types of books and content and curriculum, I think that's what people prefer deep down inside because, like you said, no one wants to be told what to do. But if you can give them kind of a framework, and then along with that, some like a companion piece where ask them their questions, and so where they can dig in and figure out what they truly believe and think and what they can do that's different, and that way they can kind of create their own process. I think that's when people have ownership in the solution and they came up with it and they use your work as kind of a guide for that, that's when real results occur.
And just like you were saying, I mean, Kaufman is going to be different from Houston ISD. I mean, they're just two totally different places. If I had moved from Kaufman as a little Kaufman kid to a Houston school, I probably would have been a little freaked out just because it would be so big. So there's not one answer to every situation, but there are just similar things that we can do, relationships, for example, that are going to work no matter where you go and what size of school you're working with and what background of the kid, whether it's a small town kid or someone who's been raised in a city.
Yeah. Hey, so Kaufman today, it's grown up a little bit.
It has grown. Still a one high school town, though. More
Yeah.
than one elementary school, but still one high school town.
Is it off of a little bit off of 45 when I'm coming south from Dallas? Is that where it is?
Well, no, it's probably be about 30 minutes from 45. You can come down 175 and you keep going towards East Texas. The next stop will be Athens and then off to Nacogdoches.
I got it now. I got my bearings. All right. Well, hey,
Yeah,
listen,
but
man.
in my high school days, Mesquite used to be Dallas. When we talked about going to Dallas, we were really going to Mesquite, which is on the east side of Dallas.
That's where the Walmart was.
And one quick story I'll tell you is literally when we would go to Dallas in high school, even literally going down to downtown Dallas. Um, Obviously, we didn't have any cell phones, no maps. So we would know the kind of the building we were going towards, and we would just drive until we could see it, and then just take an exit and just keep going towards it until we finally found it. Those were the good old days.
We guys in a car or riding a horse? What were you
Oh,
doing?
yes, in a car, yes.
All right. Hey,
That's
listen, man. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for spending. I know. I mean, you're at the conference. And you took time out of your schedule. I really, really appreciate it. And man, I'm so proud of you and the fact that you took so much time and dig down to your thoughts and your feelings and put it into this piece that you're sharing with the world is just absolutely awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you
Yeah.
having me on.
All right. Hey, tell your husband, give him a big hug and a kiss. Tell him I love him.
I will.
And
He
by the way,
loves you too.
between me, of all the people I know from those times in our lives, I'm not sure anybody that I know has aged less as you two. Like I can't figure it out.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was
Yeah,
trying to use the young filter here, so I don't know if it worked or not.
it totally
Just
worked. Trust me,
just the
I'm
filter.
feeling old. All right, all right, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate it.
All righty, bye bye.
Bye.